This book has lots of material in it. It has lots of discussions, it has theological precepts, it has debates between Christians and Jews. And you believe that this book was written in Mecca? Really? Is that what the scholars believe? Come on board. We're going to show you what they have to say. Open it up and let's see exactly where they're pointing to. And it's not Mecca.
We've been talking about the question, or the pivotal question, the important question, the vital question about Mecca, because it is the place of the alleged origin of Islam. It is the place of the alleged birth of Muhammad. It is the place of the alleged origin of the Quran itself, if we were to rely, of course, on the Standard Islamic Narrative. But the fact is, many scholars like Shoemaker are quickly discovering that there isn't a whole lot to support this Islamic narrative. With me here, of course, to continue with this discussion is our dear Dr. J. Smith. Dr. J, I mean, you've talked about a number of things concerning Mecca in the last two episodes. We quoted Shoemaker and others, and their quotations are really powerful, and it should prompt people to ask this question. What about Mecca? Why wasn't it mentioned? Why didn't it have this prominent position as we're being told in the 7th century?
Oh, well, I'll answer that very quickly. Just look at a map. Take a look at a map, and what do you notice? Mecca is in a desert, off the plateau, isolated from any water. Well, if there is no water, there is no food, no people, no place, no town, no city, no civilization, no history. That's all you need to say, and that shuts that whole paradigm. That's why there is no Mecca, not that early. However, there's something we need to even go beyond that. What about the content of the Quran itself? What about all these stories? Well, Angelica Neuwirth, fascinating. She gets into this whole discussion. I love to see what she does, because you don't think of Angelica Neuwirth really confronting the Quran at this level, but look and see what she says. And this was back in 2014 and 2015 in two different works which she wrote. And she said this: the Quran clearly demands an audience that is best described as educated individuals familiar with late antique traditions because of its content. We must assume, therefore, she says, that an extensive transfer of knowledge had already taken place, and that a broad scope of not only local but also biblical and post-biblical traditions were familiar to Muhammad's audience. Well, what now? She obviously still thinks it's Muhammad. She still thinks it's Muhammad. He has an audience. Remember what Shoemaker says. There's only a few hundred people there. Doesn't really have any history. But these biblical themes that are right through the Quran, the sophistication, Neuwirth is saying, suggest that there's an audience that understood this. Otherwise, who's it to? Who's this Quran written to? So that's the first problem. We get Wansborough and Crone and Cook and Hawting. These are the big names in the revisionist school.
Especially Wansborough.
Wansborough is kind of the one who started the whole revisionist school.
The father of the revisionist.
He's the father of the revisionist school. Yeah. And he wrote in 1977 on Quranic studies and especially sectarian milieu, those two books, 77, 1978, but this is the one on Quranic studies. When you look and see, when you look at the Quran, when you look at all these discussions that are happening, all these arguments that are going on, this does not make sense in the 7th century. Because there's no one who would have understood these kind of arguments. There's no one that far south. There's no one in a place called Mecca who would have even dialogued at this level. This is very sophisticated. These are from traditions that are much further north, but not in the Hijaz. So look and see what they say. There is simply no basis to presume that the inhabitants of these places would have been either well educated or deeply familiar with the cultural traditions of Judaism and Christianity in late antiquity. And yet they need to be if they're going to be reading the Quran. Or if the person who is writing the Quran, of course, the Islamic narrative says it's Muhammad, he would have to be certainly knowledgeable of this material. Therefore, when looking at the profundity of material on both Christianity and Judaism in the Quran, Wansborough concludes that it seems far more reasonable than any significant cultural contact between Muhammad's early followers and the world of late antiquity must instead have occurred somewhere outside of the central Hijaz. The Hijaz is that central area where you grew up. That includes Mecca, Medina, that includes also Jeddah today. That is why scholars such as, and this is Shoemaker then takes it from here, and he says that's why scholars such as Cook and Crone and Wansborough, Cook and Crone are the ones that wrote Hagerism in 1977. They were the students of Wansborough. They were writing a what-if scenario that really blew open this notion that any of the Quran or anybody named Muhammad could have come from a place called Mecca. Hawting is the one that was one of their students as well, and he was the one that taught me, and he was the one that really pushed this for a whole year. I sat under his tutelage, and I heard reference after reference shutting that down, any notion that the Mecca could be a place of scholarship or a place that the Quran could have come from, or that even someone named Muhammad could have come from. Others have postulated that the beginning of Islam must have therefore occurred somewhere much further north, much further to the north.
Bingo. And that's the northern theory hypothesis.
Yep.
Everything points there. Like, for instance, the other day I was doing things on Sharia law and even hadith, if you want to talk about hadith, or even tafsir, you'll find the majority of these scholars come from Persia. My goodness. Why would they come from Persia north and not from Mecca and Medina?
That's absolutely. And they were all writing in Baghdad.
Right.
So you can see they're all writing in Baghdad, which is in Iraq today, much too far north. So what does Shoemaker, what is his conclusion? Well, you can see what his conclusion is. We should therefore move the Quran, at least in some significant part, out of the central Hijaz, out of that place of Mecca, Medina, and into the world of late antiquity, as Wansborough and as Crone and as Cook and others, Hawting and others. They have done that. Why don't we do it? Shoemaker saying that. And he's saying this here in his book in 2022. So whether or not he just finally came to that conclusion, it's important, because what he's doing, he's quoting those who spent their whole career studying this very question. You can't get anybody who is more intrinsic in this, who's done more study on this, than Dr. Patricia Corona. And that's why Wansborough, who first made this supposition back in 1977, remember, he made this supposition back in the 1970s, and he got a death threat for that. Mm-hmm. Dr. Patricia Corona did the same thing with writing in 1977 Hagerism, and then she wrote Meccan Trade in 1987. She got a death threat. She was there teaching at Oxford University. Because of the death threat, she had to change institutions and move up to Cambridge University. And then from Cambridge, she was then headhunted by Princeton University, where she spent the rest of her time before she passed away. And I was in her office in 1995 going to debate this very material, this very question. What about Mecca? What do we do with Mecca? And I remember she said, Jay, you're going to have to say this. You're going to have to say that. You're going to have to say the other. She gave me a list of 10 different things to say about Mecca and about the Quran, about it being that far south. Brilliant questions. I remember turning to her and I said, Dr. Corona, why am I doing this debate? Why aren't you doing this debate? This is your study. You have the languages. You have the background. You have the experience. You're eloquent. You're a fiery person. And she started laughing. This is in her office. This is in 1995. She started laughing. She said, Jay, I have a chair to protect. I have an institution that I represent. I cannot debate this in public. I can write about it in my books, and then I get peer reviewed, and I have to respond to that peer review. But you, pointing to me, she says, you don't have any chair to protect. You don't have a doctorate. At that time, I didn't have a doctorate. You don't have an institution to represent. That's true. I didn't have an institution to represent. She said, the only person who you represent is Jesus Christ. What a conclusion. The only person you represent is Jesus Christ. You have a freedom I don't have, she said. You can debate this. You come here to Cambridge and you debate Dr. Jamal Badawi. Here are the 10. I will feed you the material, but you do the debate. And I'm saying it to Muslims who are watching now, or to Christians, not Muslims, sorry, to Christians or anybody that is listening to what Al-Fadi and I are doing here. This is your debate. This is your time. You can take this material. You can take what we're feeding you. And remember, this is coming out of well-reasoned. This is all coming out of material that is quoted. You notice what we've been doing this whole series? We're quoting scholar after scholar. These are Western scholars who spent their whole career coming to these conclusions. You don't have to go and do what they do. You don't have to have their chairs. You don't even have to be in their institutions. What you need to do is you need to debate this. Like Patricia Crone saying to me, saying to do this, you need to do this as well. Because this, what we're feeding you, must not remain in your heads. This must get into the public sphere. This must go where it's needed the most. And Muslims need to hear this. And Muslims have to come up a response. And I'm saying this to you, Muslims. You've got to respond to this. You've got to come back and tell us, what are you going to do with Mecca? You can't just leave Mecca there because there's nothing there. But let's widen that. Let's just don't look at Mecca. What I want to do next now is look at the Hijaz. Let's see what the scholars are saying about the Hijaz, because it gets even more difficult when you even bring Yathrib into this whole equation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, brother. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying this. We welcome your comments as always. Send us emails, send us any suggestions about maybe possible resources that you would like for us to explore, as you've been doing. And we are, of course, excited that our Muslim friends are even watching this. So we invite you as a Muslim, of course, to explore the resources and the sources and the references that we're providing for you. Come back at us. Tell us why you disagree. Give us a proof, evidence, written quotations, written sources that can prove us wrong. So far, it seemed like all scholars that we've quoted have reached this simple conclusion. Islam, if we want to take it seriously, would have a northern origin. And that's what we've been saying for all this time. All along, we've been drumming this, telling you there is something suspicious about the north that leads us to believe, if not all of Islam, at least the bulk foundation of Islam have emerged in that region. Thank you, Dr. J. Thank you, everyone. This is Al-Fadi. God bless. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, CIRA International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.